All right, so in April, your address marking the release of the State of the World Population Report advocated for the creation of a creation of policies with a gendered lens. I think the audience wants to understand what do you mean by creating policies using a gendered lens, and how do you think advancing gender equality influences a country's overall progress and prosperity?
Thank you so much. Again, I represent the United Nations Fund for Population. So we look at overall population issues. We look at sexual and reproductive health. We look at gender. We look at gender-based violence. And we look at how populations are transforming over time and what kinds of transitions they're going through. And so when we look at the population of India, we see 1.4 billion people. And we see 1.4 billion possibilities. And we see at least half of those waiting to be unleashed, because we feel that without a gender transformative approach, many of those great potentials will be hidden or remain in a box and not unleashed. So what do we mean by this? And what impact would it have? Really, first and foremost, it's a rights issue. It's the right of every girl and woman to have the same advantages, to have the same access, and to be able to reach her potential in the same way that a boy or a man does. So that's very simple. But I hate to talk about rights and rights issues, because you know what, particularly as a foreigner, it shuts people down immediately. So I don't bother with that argument anymore. Really what I talk to people about is the social and economic arguments. If we look at the social arguments, we know that in societies that have the greatest gender equality, they tend to be the most stable. They have the greatest level of peace and security and the least amount of conflict. So I think you mentioned it in your opening remarks. Girls want to lead, and they want to lead to societies that are clean, that are equal, that are prosperous, but that are also safe and that are conflict-free. So that's one. The second is the social argument. Girls, when they have greater greater social equality, are able to reach their potential. They're able to really contribute in ways that make societies more stable and greater in economic growth. And that's my third point. We know from McKinsey and other reports here in India, if there were gender equality, full gender equality, the country at the very least could experience 18% greater gross domestic product. So just alone by dealing with the gender issue. So this is what we mean by a gender transformative approach, really improving the stability of societies, improving the security of societies, the peace, and the economic well-being of societies.
Sorry, I'm struggling with this. Oh, can I? Okay, perfect. Fantastic, and I completely agree with you. A couple of years ago, I was working for an organization where we mainstream gender in demining, and it was so important to give the demined land back to women in a more equitable way. So I completely agree with what you're saying, how we need to invest in bringing in a gender transformative approach to policies. Fantastic. And then with this, I'd like to go on to Ridhima, and I would like to, firstly, I'm very, very impressed and very, very inspired by your work. You are the youngest climate activist that I and the country has ever seen. I think everyone in the audience is itching to ask this question. What do you think is the significance of young people, particularly girls, in the climate justice movement?
I mean, first of all, thank you for having me on this great panel. And I would like all of the girls and everybody present in the audience to just appreciate yourself, clap, hoot, show us the energy that you girls are here. And you understand the problem and you're here to voice up for yourself, not just yourself, but for countless girls out there who are struggling because of their rights. So yeah, it's amazing to see a lot of people here. And as an activist, as a young person, I think young people can do wonders. Because, I mean, firstly, I think we do not really have an agenda or, a profit that we are chasing after when we are working. And most of the time, I feel like, young people, when we start working, I mean, I started working because I was stressed. I just couldn't take this stress of dying someday because of climate crisis. And that's why I started working. And I feel most of the young people, they start taking action when they see there is a problem and they see how people are neglecting it. And, young people, specifically right now, if I talk about climate sector, because that's where I work, I believe you have seen, I mean, everybody has seen all around the world that young people are leading a change everywhere, take it from strikes to holding up campaigns to doing petitions like I did. So I believe young people have a lot of power in their hand, and I believe it is important for us to have young people within discussions, within sessions, within, everything that's been happening, specifically when it comes to decision making, because at the very end, it is about our future, it is about our life, and it is about, how things are going to be in the coming years. We are going to be the ones, maybe some of us would be policymakers or, businessmen or, businesswomen, or people who would be driving change. So I guess it is really important to have young people's discussions on the table. And I feel even when you've seen within the climate sector, most of the activists or, people working, you will see girls. So, I mean, I always feel happy and empowered that, there are girls leading even strikes, everything, from strikes to campaigns and everything, you'll find enormous, a great number of girls driving up change. So I think it is important for us to have young people in the decision making or, in all these conversations, because it's about their life, it's about their future. And specifically, the rights that we are fighting for, it's our rights. So who better can represent us than ourselves? So I think that is why I feel young people's participation is important. And yeah, that's what I've been advocating for, I guess.
Thanks for sharing that, Ridhima. Very, very powerful, and also something that we are trying to replicate with Girl Up, getting more young people, young girls to the forefront, trying to amplify their voices, because we believe that there is nothing about them without them. So, and I think this space is proof of that, having conversations with young people. Great, thank you for that answer. And moving over to Rajshri. Firstly, huge fan. And in your acting career, Rajshri, you have portrayed roles of very, very strong women, be it Lakshmi, be it Neelam in Trial by Fire. And I'm trying to understand, does the real life character affect the real life character? Does playing a Neelam or a Lakshmi affect Rajshri? And how has it changed you? Or has it empowered you?
Hi. Hello. I can't hear you guys.
Give her a big round of applause.
Thank you so much, Girl Up, and what a lovely team. And I feel so good to just, gel with all of them. I walked with all black. So, as an actor, as a real life, it is mixed up. And as I started my journey as a theater actor in a small town from a very humble background where, acting is basically a curricular activities. It's not something where, you can earn your living. So the struggle was very hard, and a lot of hustling was there. And the protocol of life that, okay, you have to be a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer and all that, or you have to earn your living. That's the protocol of most of the small town. I don't know how many people are from small town over here. How many are there? Most of them, yeah. Okay, few of them. So you have to break that space first, that, okay, you have to do something. Like being a climate activist, is it like a job? No, like or being an environmentalist, is it like something you can do it? No, it's like, okay, you can do it like 1 hour, go there, do something and come back, but the reality of life is different. I had to break that and find myself after many, many years. I started acting in my 30s. I found myself that, okay, I love storytelling. I love literature, and literature basically opened up my life, like reading Premchand to Day Prakash to, Ismat Chugtai to Manto to many, many Terence Lewis. So many people opened up actually about society. And that gave me a direction that what kind of a work actually you would like to do, even as an actor. Of course, I did some odd parts in some films just to understand the world of cinema. But then when Lakshmi happened from Angry Indian Goddesses, that kind of, deconstructed me in many ways. Playing a woman from a small town and going through a court case. And honestly, such roles are very rare in the film industry. Because if you look at it, we make around 2,000 films in a year. But how many are, basically a woman-centric? Very few. Maybe in 2020 to 2023, the numbers have increased. But if you look at it like some 10 years back, it was very less. So finding those kind of roles where you're telling a story about a woman, her journey, was very rare. So that kind of changed me, and I felt that this is the path I want to go. And then later on, be working on S. Durga, which was Sexy Durga, which won Toronto, like in Rotterdam Film Festival, and many other awards, telling a story about this woman who's going through a journey of, abuse and molestation. And actually, this is what the reality of our society, that till today women are not safe. So it was a very difficult journey, but I chose to do it because I feel that it's my responsibility to do something which comes from reality. Or be it Ismat Chugtai from Manto, telling a story about this social reformer, or doing Savitribai Phule, or playing Neelam Krishnamurti. You must be knowing Upahar Cinema Hall case in Delhi in 1997. There was a fire had happened in a cinema hall, and 59 people died. And Neelam Krishnamurti and Shekhar Krishnamurti and a couple of other AVOOT members filed a case against the cinema owner, and it's been 25 years. Neelam and Shekhar and team goes every day to the cinema, to the court, and stand up for their rights. And they're still fighting. That's the courage, and I think that's what I've learned in my life. Be it from Ismat Chugtai to Lakshmi from Angry Indian Goddesses to Neelam from Trial by Fire. It's courage. Is never give up. Is, stand up for your right. And fight. If nothing is happening, you don't have to feel discouraged and all. Stand up again. Neelam, 25 years old, she's still fighting the case. She's gone through so much in her life, but next day, again, she goes back to the trial court and stand there. And that's exactly I learned in my life, that being a social worker also on ground, if it's not happening, go again, do it again, find your solution. If nothing is happening, that doesn't mean that it won't happen at all. You have to do it. You have to make sure that the solution happens, the action happens on ground. In my social work also, I made sure that if I'm working on something, it has to happen. And I think that's how I feel that, my real and real life is kind of collided together.
Very beautifully said, very beautifully said. And you also said that you found yourself in the 30s. I think I'm also finding myself in my 30s. Never too late.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I can just feel that if I'm starting over here now, look at these girls, all of them, oh my God, you know, they are going to be like, can I just shift with you so you will be I'll be taken care of. You know, it's amazing to see the young girls are standing up, you know, raising their voice, trying to find ways, you know, and it's just incredible.
It truly is. It truly is. I mean, look at this room, and there's so much inspiration, so much energy emanating from this room. But Rajshri, I actually had a follow-up question. You did mention that there are certain skills, you know, the never give up attitude, the resilience that you've been seeing in Neelam, and that is, I'm wondering if that skill is something that you that we should be nurturing in our young girls as qualities, because you also work for a non-profit, as you mentioned, Nabhangan Foundation, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Nabhangan,
yeah. Yes. Yeah. And you work in the grassroots level. You've worked with communities. You worked to rehabilitate trafficked women. What are these qualities that we need to nurture in our girls right now?
You know, just go with the flow. A lot of things will happen on your way. I come from a family, you know, where every day was a challenge for us. So I've learned in a very hard way. And, but you know what happened? Like, when I left from my village, I had my own journey to follow. And for a few years, I was just following my own path. Okay, I'm doing this, I'm good, you know, I'm having a good time and all. And then when I looked back, I realized that, you know, there's so much work I have to do for my own people. I was in Nepal after the earthquake, and I worked there for a village, and I realized that, you know, when I left, I felt that, oh my God, I've done so much, and, you know, there was something, you know, we kind of rehabilitated the whole village and things happened. When I left, I realized that everything is going to be zero, because it's not a self-sustainable plan. When you leave some work, are you going back to see whether it's still happening, what is actually happening? There has to be, you have to look back and see that, okay, all the points have been covered, everything is done, you know. Whatever you have done, there is a team over here. You've created a team, created a leader of people from the community who's taking care of the village, you know. So Nepal was zero for me, and I was so disappointed that I realized that I want to do something which is more sustainable. So my village work started from there. And when I built my first river 10 years back, I realized that just building one river won't change the whole village. I'll have to do work on the sanitation, I'll have to work on the education, I'll have to work on the healthcare. So I made sure that I tick all the boxes, and I make sure that I work on the community. I create leaders along with working on the other aspects of the village. So that's how it started. And then I kind of, you know, that became my model, that I cannot work on one particular thing. I cannot leave something till the time I don't create leaders from the same community. And so there is an exit policy, but there is a connect till today. Like my first village, now I have 30 villages. I have adopted 30 villages, and I'm working, I built 4 schools and some 10 rivers or something like that. But I still have a connect with my first village. And it's a chain. I don't know if I've answered you right. I don't know what I'm saying.
Not at all. We have understood everything, and this makes so much sense. And the fact that you've adopted 30 villages and 10 rivers, I think that's really, really, really cool. Please, can we have a huge round of applause for Rajshri? Fantastic. Before I begin, friends, you can ask them questions. We do have a Mentimeter link in the digital booklet that you have probably downloaded from the registration desk. Can I have a show of hands if everyone's clear? Great, fantastic. Please do ask our panelists their questions, and I'll take them up right after I finish my questions. Great. Moving on to you, Andrea ma'am. The world is, and I'm reading this because it's a huge number, the world is home to a transformative generation of 900 million girls and women. How can we equip this cohort to become not just leaders of tomorrow, but of today?
Yeah, thanks so much. I think there's many different ways. But from my perspective and from the perspective of my organization, it starts first and foremost with bodily autonomy. If you don't have bodily autonomy, if you're not safe in your body, if you're not able to choose for your body, and if we talk about sexual and reproductive health, if you're not able to choose if, when, with whom, and how many children to have, then what agency do you have in your life? You're somebody else's machine. You're somebody else's property or asset. So it starts first and foremost with sexual and reproductive health, which of course is complicated in itself. It means, do you have the information? Do you have the knowledge you need to ensure your own sexual and reproductive health? It also means, do you have access to services that you need to maintain that sexual and reproductive health, to practice contraception if you choose to? And it means throughout your life cycle. So we talk a lot now about married women and family planning, but it starts long before that. It starts, and I know you know it because here at Girl Up, you work a lot on menstrual hygiene. And I'm delighted to hear that, by the way, because this is 40 years I'm working in development. And probably the first 30 of those years, nobody ever talked about menstrual hygiene management. And I'm thrilled that here it's becoming more and more an open topic and less stigmatized and more accepted. So it starts early on, but it goes right through the life cycle of women. It goes all the way through to menopause. It goes all the way through to the cancers that women often experience, and men, by the way. We're starting to break those taboos as well. So it's about knowledge, it's about access to services, and it's about high quality and stigma-free and prejudice-free services. So when you go for those services, it doesn't matter if you're married or not. It doesn't matter what your age is, and it doesn't matter what your background is. You have a right to those services and that information. The next issue is about bodily safety and living in a world that's free from gender-based violence. If you're not free to walk around safely, wearing what you choose to wear, because we know from the data, gender-based violence has nothing to do with what you wear. It happens against babies, it happens against old ladies, it happens against those in bikinis, and it happens against those in burqas. So it's really not about that, is it? And until we have that safety and that comfort to be able to be free from a violence-based world, it will be very difficult to succeed. The next is about technology. The world has always been evolving, but I think we know that it's evolving faster and faster than we can even keep up with. And so if girls and women don't have access to technology, they will be left behind, and the gap will get bigger and bigger. In the UN, and in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, we talk about leaving no one behind, and for short, LNOB. But I always like to say, and if I had been at the table when they were making up that phrase, I would have said PNOB. I would have said push no one behind. Because I believe that leaving no one behind is a very passive phrase. And it's very easy to say, we're trying, but, some will always get left behind. But I think when we say push no one behind, it's more active, and we have to be more accountable to ourselves. Because for every rupee or every dollar or every hour that you invest in empowering some, if you don't get everybody, you're pushing them further behind. You're creating greater and greater gaps. So for me, digital technology and access to and knowledge of and ability to use and use in a safe way, because we know that violence against women and girls in cyberspace is a huge issue. Girls will never be able to assume their rightful place at the table. And then finally, it's about decent work for women. So that starts with access to quality education and the same opportunities. And it's about affordable and quality childcare. It's about policies around maternity and paternity leave. Men should also have the right to stay home with their children and to nurture those children and to return to careers and continue on their path, just as women should. It's about flexible working arrangements. And I think we all saw during COVID, it's very easy to be flexible. I can tell you, even in my own office, before I came to India, we had a flexible work policy and nobody wanted to take advantage of it. Nobody trusted it. Nobody thought it was possible. And then COVID happened and it was imposed on everybody. And guess what? It worked. Everybody managed. And we now know it's very possible. So sometimes we have to be pushed kicking and screaming into new ways of working and new ways of being before we accept that it's possible and even better than what we had before. And then finally, if we talk about decent work and decent livelihoods, linked to that and underpinning it all, it's about positive masculinity. And right now, frankly, we spend a lot of time, before it was about men and boys get all the advantages. So now we've had several decades of programming focused towards women and girls. But there's a realization now that if we don't go back and address the men and boys, we're still fighting in a paper bag. We're never going to make the transformative impact that we need. It's about changing men and boys' attitudes. It's about changing the way they view women, but it's also about changing our own mindsets about what constitutes positive masculinity. It's about what constitutes a real man. Can a real man stay home and take care of children? Can a real man follow a woman? How do we feel about that? We also have to look at our own attitudes. Because at the end of the day, remember, who's raising those men? It's us. It's us as mothers. And how many of you in this room are married? Not so many. I don't think I need to tell you, though, the impact of mothers-in-law in this society and in most societies. Extremely powerful force. So what's determining the views of the mother-in-law? Who are those mothers-in-law? It's us. It's us. It's how we raise our sons. It's how we raise our daughters to think. So it's not just about women. It's about how the women raise the men. And this is where we need to go back and recapture if we really want to transform the potential of girl leaders going forward. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
No, this was fantastic. I love that what you said. Please. from LNOB to PNOB. I love it. Never looked at it that way, and how our words and even the way we phrase our sentences and our words impact our action. So that's very interesting and very powerful. And actually I had a follow-up question. Looking ahead, can you tell us a little more about what UNFPA's primary goals and milestones are regarding girls' leadership in India for the next decade?
So I have to be honest, I don't know that we've thought about it for a decade. We definitely have a 5-year plan with very clear targets that we work on with government and with as a commitment to our member states. First of all, it's about the bodily autonomy that I mentioned, and we're aiming to empower over 1 million girls in India. We work predominantly in 4 states. We work in Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Orissa, and Rajasthan. Those are the 4 states that tend to score the lowest when it comes to preventable maternal mortality, when it comes to access to family planning, when it comes to gender equality and gender-based violence. We also have a target. We choose the most marginalized. We choose to go out and seek the most vulnerable. So whether that's scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, by religion, we're really looking to seek the furthest behind and scoop them forward. Because if we don't, again, we'd be pushing them behind. The next, we're working on gender and gender-based violence, training service providers to really make a difference in the way that services are provided to survivors of gender-based violence. And that's anything from the police. We work a lot with police academies and training them on how they view gender-based violence, to how they treat survivors of gender-based violence, to mental health workers and how they treat survivors, to health workers and how they treat survivors of gender-based violence, but also families, how they look at it, and how the shame is not about the survivor of the gender-based violence. The shame is on the perpetrator, and trying to change those attitudes. So trying to improve services for several 100,000 survivors of gender-based violence. We're also looking to change social norms and attitudes. We would love to do more work with the film industry. We are already supporting awards, the Lodley Awards, for example, that try to change the way that journalists and commercial marketing, television, the way that gender is portrayed in all the different forms of media. And we've done some studies over the past 10 years, since the Nirbhaya incident in particular, about how, for example, journalists write about rape and sexual violence. And we're making a small impact. We're making a small impact. The language that's being used is now more survivor-centered. It's more about what the perpetrator has done and less about what the target of that violence was doing or is. It's more about the crime itself. It's really trying to change the optics, to change the lens around that. And we're trying to do that more and more through social media. We're working with journalists. We're working with schools of journalism to train journalists about how they go out and report on gender and gender-based violence and sexual and reproductive health. And frankly, even if you look at journalism itself, journalism is evolving. And there are now more communicators and influencers than journalists. So we're really even trying to change who we're working with and how they write and influence others. So we're increasingly working in different vernacular languages because those are the ones who are going to influence. It's people who listen in their own language to their own influencers. So again, trying to change social norms through social media and formal media as well. And then finally, trying to build up local leadership. And we have a program with the Ministry of Panchayati Raj to create girl and women-friendly Panchayati Raj. So from the very lowest level, the gram level, the village level, not just having women's leadership on those structures, but having those women assume an even greater role so that they're not puppets speaking for their husbands, so that they themselves are speaking and representing the interests of women. Because, you know, frankly, I sit on a lot of these panels, and we talk about women and girls leadership, and sometimes the optic is really about the boardroom. And I say, but it doesn't start in the boardroom. In fact, that's the summit of where you get to. It starts at the village level. It starts at the very lowest levels. You yourself said you came from modest background. You came from difficult circumstances. You struggled. So you know it's not about the elevator up to the boardroom. It's about what's happening on the ground right then and there. And we know, we have data that where women in Panchayati Raj have positions and where they're able to articulate, we know that government spending on social issues like health and education and sexual and reproductive health and development issues is 20 to 30% higher. So we consider it a really good investment. And as I mentioned, we're about pushing no one behind, whether it's about caste, tribe, whether it's about persons with disabilities, and whether it's about those on the gender identity continuum, really making sure that everybody is brought forward when it comes to sexual and reproductive health and gender-based violence and participation and leadership. I'll stop there.
Can we have a huge round of applause for Andrea, please? What you said about not just, you know, the pinnacle is at the boardroom, being able to go and be a part of a boardroom is at the pinnacle of it, but it starts at a very grassroots level. Being able to voice your own opinion even in your family, being able to advocate for yourself in the school, being able to speak for yourself at a college level, all of this matters, and I completely agree with what you said. But since we have a little less time, I'm going to go over to Ridhima now. Ridhima, in 2017, when you were just 9 years old, you filed a petition against the government at the National Green Tribunal for lack of climate action. And that's supremely brave, and I draw a lot of inspiration from that. But how can we ensure that more young girls have access to platforms in such spaces that, and so that they can amplify their own voices?
I mean, I believe the very first thing and the foremost important thing is to have support from your families. Because I believe, even when I started taking action, I simply asked my parents a question about, I started my activism after seeing a flash flood that happened at Kedarnath in 2013. I was 5 or 6 back then, and witnessing the flash flood and imagining myself dying because of it was why I asked my parents this question that, what can I do to stop the floods, because I didn't want it to die. And that is when my parents chose to tell me the truth instead of saying, it's just a natural phenomena, you can't really do much to stop it, and let's just it be what's happening. But my parents chose to tell me the truth. They told me about global warming, they told me about climate crisis. And I can say from there is when I started learning. And to be very honest, when I approached my dad with this idea of, I want to do something which will make a big impact. So I had huge, big ambitions. I didn't know what, petitions really meant back then. And to be honest, I didn't even knew if I was eligible to do a petition because I was under 18. So I was like, can I do it? But I can say my dad supported me a lot. Both my parents supported me. And they did give me this option that, do you really want to do it? But with that, it came with, this responsibility that you have to continue what you're doing. And I say, parental support is important, support from your families is important, because at the very end, there are many girls, those who face discrimination within the household. And, when girls do face that kind of discrimination, they are not really that brave to take step for themselves when they're not at their home. It could be, taking step for themselves at their workplace or, somewhere else. And to be honest, I've seen many examples of, girls not being brave enough, to voice out for themselves. And I had this girl in my school who always used to tell me about that, her mom did this and, she did these chores before coming to school and, she has to do these things going back. And we were always like, back then when we were kids, I was like, why do you have to do these things? Why just your mom? Because at my household, both my parents share these works, like whether it's household work, whether it's, maybe one day my mom is not at home, my dad is, he's, on a break, so he will cook if my mom is not at home. And that's something that, for a society is not that common where I live. So I think, that is something, the support from the family itself is really important. And then I believe, having this education that you can voice out for yourself, and that it is important for you to voice out for yourself, because not many people know that, others will be taking action. And educating girls, specifically in the rural areas, I think is important. And with that as well, I feel educating the families within the rural areas is also important. And I can say there are many examples of, girls doing a lot within the rural communities, because there was once when I went to Gujarat and I saw this, village where I visited, and, there was this huge, small group of girls within the village. They were working, as a group. They were educating people around, not littering the waste, not burning your waste. They were talking about menstrual health. They were talking about women's right and empowerment. So I can say there are a lot of examples of how girls are turning ways. But at the same time, I feel like, the support from the families, and then at the same time, proper education is important as a first step for girls having this proper say, because once, if they're not educated properly, that they can bring the change, then, they will in a way hesitate to, take the first step.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing, Ridhima. Can we have a round of applause for her? And we're down to the 1 minute mark, so I'm going to give each of these panelists 30 seconds to, we did have 2 questions from the audience, but unfortunately we've now run out of time. But one last question for Rajshri, Ridhima, and Andrea ma'am. I'd love to know from you, what is your personal dream for the women and girls of our country? Starting with you, Rajshri.
सबसे पहली बात तो ये है कि don't be hard on yourself. Be empathetic, be a good listener, and just chill. This is life. It's a beautiful life. Don't take it so seriously. I think that's my first, that's basically, I look back to my 16-year-old and I tell myself the same thing. So I'm telling you all, okay, yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. Over to you, Ridhima. 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I believe I just want this movement to go on like this. I mean, I do want to see a lot of changes, but I think right now we have a lot of enthusiasm within the girls, within, this movement. So I want this to continue. And then at the same time, I want this, sweet, humble, kind natures that girls are known for. I want you guys to keep that within yourselves and then, do wonders. I know you're doing great, and girls rock.
Yes, girls rock. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. My dream for you is that you're bold, that you're vocal, and that you're visible. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Perfect. Be bold, be visible, be vocal, be empathetic, and just chill. So that's our message from our panelists, and now we've come to an end. And over to Priyadarshini and Siddhi. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you. We really appreciate it. Can we have a round of applause?